Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its annual reorganization meeting held on January 8, 2019. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Cedar Grove Times, the Star Ledger, the Herald News, the Township of Verona, and the Verona Education Association. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted in each of Verona's 6 schools, the board office, and town hall. This posting was also sent to the above newspapers, all SCA presidents, and SCA liaisons. The Verona Board of Education operates under a consent agenda format. Any board member has a right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public present. Mr. Allworth?
Here.
Mr. Day?
Here.
Mrs. Briscoe? Here. Mr. Elliott?
Here.
Mrs. Fresky?
Here. So before we start, if there's anybody that has any comments on the agenda items, and I'm guessing not, so we're going to jump into our presentation. And tonight we have Principal Cogdill of Verona High School and Ms. Salisbury from the Business Department. So we're going to give it to Mr. Cogdill. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Salisbury, who, by the way, just was awarded the VP Teacher of the Year for the high school, so it's awesome. She also just came back from Florida with the whole softball team, which is, that should get an award too. So great job at that. But the reason she's here tonight is to talk to you about the VHS Capstone program, which is our internship program. It's grown dramatically over the last few years, but it's really because of Mrs. Salisbury and the work that she's done. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to this great teacher.
Hi. So I don't know everybody that well, but I'm Angela Salisbury, like Mr. Cogdill said. I just wanted to go over a couple of things about the program. If there's anything that I don't touch upon, if you have questions, or you can stop me at any point, feel free. Like Mr. Cogdill said, the program is basically an internship. We offer it to our seniors here, and they have to do 20 hours a week at their place of business. While they're there, they're not required to come to school. Their grades freeze during that time period, and they basically choose where they go based on their career interests. I help them along the way, but they're not required to go to a certain internship that I've set up or that the school provides. It's all based on their interests and what they go out and seek. So the dates this year fall between right after the last AP exam and before graduation when they come back for practice. So that's the time frame for this year. So May 18th is actually a Saturday. The reason why is because there are some kids whose jobs require them to be there more on the weekend than during the weekdays. Some places are closed on Mondays. So that's the first available day to start, and then they come back before graduation. So basically we have some requirements to get in. You have to be in good academic standing. You can't be failing any classes. You have to have a satisfactory discipline record, and you have to be, regularly coming to school as we see it, so that we can, in good faith, put you out into the work world and know that you're going to show up to your job. So if you can't come to school, you can't really. There's nothing to stand on in terms of going to school to work. So that's, those are there's some others, but for the most part, those are the main requirements of getting in. Once you're in, this is how we sort of make sure that the kids are meeting the requirements. There's a lot of communication between myself and the mentors, the people that are serving as mentors to the students. The students themselves have to complete evaluations weekly. The mentors have to communicate with me weekly. There's photo submissions, and then there's final evaluations. And I also have to go out and observe each student at work at least once during their internship. That's part of, I recently became SLE certified, which is a state certification that allows me to be, I was trained OSHA training, and I have the background now to evaluate, the on-site visit, and I create learning plans for all the seniors before they go to this internship based on the career field that they're interested in. So while they're there, though that's what they're doing. So it's not just like go to work and that's it. There's a lot to be done on their end also. So this has been in existence since 2015, the class of 2015. It was sort of developed with a committee of myself, the administrators here at the time, and some parents. And we kind of mimicked our program off of Montclair High School, who does something similar. Obviously, they're way bigger than us, so we've sort of tailored it to work for Verona. But the first year I had it, I had only 22 kids who were interested in it and participated in the program. And as you can see, it's grown, tremendously over the last few years. A huge jump from, as it was in 2016 to 17. And now I'm all but 4 kids in the upcoming graduating class that are participating. And I'm really working those 4 kids to try and get 100%. But as of today, that's where I'm at.
And I had a question on
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's amazing exponential growth. What caused that, or were there more opportunities for more students to take internships?
Yeah, good question. I think in the beginning, my challenge was just kind of getting everybody to understand it a little bit. And I was getting phone calls from parents saying, my kids want to just enjoy their last few weeks of school, which as a teacher is kind of strange because it's like we're here to continue school, and just because AP tests are over or whatever it is that is your driving focus, it shouldn't be come to school and have free time for 4 weeks. So that was a little frustrating in the beginning, and then it's one of those things that as more people did it, more people wanted to do it. And I was lucky enough, Mr. Cogdill gives me time off to go and kind of promote it. So I spent a day this year, and actually during the class of 2018, I took a day and I went into family living classes, which is the senior health class, and I kind of did a similar presentation to them, and I explained it, and I let the kids ask questions. Before that, we had always done it in like a big forum, like come to the auditorium, but this was really good because you're in a classroom, and they were able to ask me questions and give them answers, and it was a lot more personal when it came to the explanation. So I think that really helped. And now after so many kids are doing it, I think now I said it's becoming a thing that you don't want to be the one not doing it because everybody's doing it. So it reached that tipping point a little
Were
bit.
there more companies offering positions, or?
I've always had really willing participants for the most part. The good thing is once we've had kids in placements, they're willing to take us back because we've had tremendous results. Like the kids have all been really good representation in Verona, and I've gotten many people say like, we'll take another kid, we'll take another kid. So that's kind of snowballing. So it's a little bit of all of that combined, I think.
Just another quick
Yeah.
question. So if you don't get 100% participation, what are those 4 seniors do?
That's a good question.
Because there's nobody else is there.
Right. That's one of the things I'm trying to define because there really hasn't been, even last year with the few kids that were left. I don't know. We had some teachers merge together and do kind of like a book club. They're required to still come to school and do their work. Last year we had some kids, taking the days off that they had to spend. But the teachers are kind of supposed to be business as usual. There really aren't that many classes that we run here that are just seniors in the room, right? I mean, English is one for sure, but a lot of them are mixed bag. Like I teach the business classes, and for me, a class is just lighter. It's not decimated. It's just there's 5, 7 less kids. So really, a lot of the classes are still kind of business as usual. It's a few will kind of be senior heavy, and then, like I said, the teachers have kind of dealt with this now a little bit, so they come up with a project to kind of round out the year. So this is similar numbers, just the percentage. So we've gone, like you said, exponentially from the beginning up to, I'm hoping one day it'll be 100%. If not this year, hopefully next year. So these are just some things that people have said about the program. Like I said, we get a lot of really good feedback from the mentors. Everything has been positive. A lot of people, I try to keep it as easy as possible for people who take our students to do the weekly evaluations. The last thing anybody needs is more work. This is supposed to help them. So I try to keep it really user-friendly and very simple to make sure that it's done and it's done easily. So these are just some things that I've gotten back in the past about the program itself. You know, a lot of adults are saying, like, I wish I had something like this in high school, or I wish, you know, my kids had something like this at their school. So it's really been met with a lot of praise, not just the program itself, but our kids. Our kids are really doing fantastic work all over town, as far away as New York City, you know, and everything in between. And that's really a testament to the community of Verona and the way these kids are raised and the way they go out and kind of put their best self forth. So if just briefly, I won't go through them all, but there were some interesting things that took place last year. Basically, where it says the career cluster, each one of the learning plans that I create for the students goes with the 21st century career readiness standards. So the students meet with me individually. I'll click through this as I talk so it doesn't take long. And they tell me what they're interested in, and then they sit down with me and we talk about it, and then I put together a learning plan from there, and then that's what I use to make sure that they meet their expectations and their standards while they're at school. So we've met almost all the career clusters over the course of the few years. So it's pretty much whatever the students are interested in, that's their driving force in them choosing the internship. So everything from, like, here we were in a catering hall, and we have a ton of kids going back into the classroom, which is great. They go back to their elementary schools. Some of them stay here and help their teachers here. The middle school, people in the school library, music department. Mark fits in there, you can't really even tell he's they go to other schools. They don't have to stay in Verona. They go to other classrooms. They go with their parents to work, or they go you know, to a neighboring district. So we have lots of kids going back and helping in the schools. Mark Rossi, there's your crib. And then, like, all the kid comments are basically like, they're all positive. I never really knew if I wanted to be a teacher. Now I do, or even now I don't. And those are all okay too. Like, I always tell the kids, you might learn what you absolutely don't want to do out of this experience more so than you learn what you do, and that's fine. A lot of business management. There's so many, you know, family-owned businesses in town and small businesses, so a lot of the kids kind of stay local and help, like Billy Chupak helped his dad's business. And the reality is these kids could be inheriting these businesses in the future, Joey Zucchino's dad's business. So it's not out of the question to say, like, you know, try it now while this might be where you're headed. We had a whole bunch of kids this year work on the Verona magazine with Miss McLaughlin and Miss Shacatano, and we have a whole bunch of kids doing it again this year. So that's always nice because there's a finished product that they can use, and there's like an end goal, which is cool. So I have some of them here. Those guys worked for them. And it's basically like a wide range of just like there's a job for everybody. This was my favorite comment. Children are tough. From what? That's the best one. They go back to the rescue squad. I have students signed up to work at the police department, fire prevention. It's really, they're all over, which is nice. Doctor's offices, dentists, and a lot of physical therapy. That's like the hot new job. Everyone wants to be a PT or athletic trainer, and that's like everybody wants that. So I think that's it. Any other questions or?
I'd just like to add a comment that my son participated in 2016, and it was an amazing,
Yes, he's
amazing
one of the
experience.
few.
Yeah, he was. He was one of the
Yeah.
30 that did it.
Yeah.
But you know, he had the opportunity to do some things that he never would have had a chance to do. He had the opportunity to, you know, actually put something on his resume. He built LinkedIn connections. It was super. And you know, getting an internship at college sometimes that helps to have another internship experience.
Right.
People can see that.
Right.
So it's really.
Some of these companies have offered our kids summer jobs. You know, they're doing a good job, and they say, just stay, just keep coming,
Yeah.
and we'll pay you. And
Right.
I get a lot of that too, like they got summer
It's
jobs.
just incredible the way you built it over this period of
Thank
time.
you.
Really
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're really impressed. Just want to commend you for all of your efforts. There's no doubt in our mind that the results wouldn't be what they were if you weren't at the helm.
Oh, thank you.
And you're so supportive and nurturing. You've done a tremendous job. I know you're aiming for 100%. But
We'll see.
that's a
It's good
huge
for them.
accomplishment in
Yeah.
such a short amount of time. And I think you hit the nail on the head. What resonated with me was it's a great experience for kids to identify what they really love. But more importantly, it's also an opportunity for them to identify what they perhaps don't like as much as maybe they thought
Right.
they liked in the
Yeah.
beginning. And there's a lot to take away from that. So it's a really important experience for them, and the kids get a lot out of it, and I think the program's going to be here for a long time. And
Hope so.
thank you for all of your efforts on
Thank
that.
you.
And thanks for coming tonight.
Of course.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very much.
Thank you, Ms. Salisbury.
Yep.
And now we're gonna roll right into the superintendent's report.
Virginia, we thought you needed a friend.
Sorry.
Jim did.
That was for you, Virginia. You didn't feel alone.
Thank you, Mr. Cogdill. Thank you, Mrs. Salisbury.
That's so
Have a great
nice of
night.
you.
All Jim. We'll take your picture with him later. Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. I have 3 updates as part of the superintendent update. Number 1, I'll talk about the referendum first. I'd like to provide, and Ms. Fresky can also jump in on this, provide an update on our meeting with the township regarding pilot funding. And then I'll leave the best for last. It's a preliminary budget progress update. Our formal budget presentation, Ms. Nardino and I will provide on April 23rd. Tonight I'll present, I'll give you a little bit of an update and capture where we're at and what we're projecting for April 23rd. So first, the referendum. The board and I and Ms. Nardino have had an opportunity over the past couple of months, and we've been providing updates to the public during our board meetings around the topics that are going to be included. We are getting closer to our end goal. The current estimates are at about $27 million. We are still waiting on other estimates to be finalized. We do think that that number could go up to 29 or $30 million. That includes elementary, middle school, and high school. It includes facilities across the board. In addition to that, we are taking a look at how do we get this number down to a more reasonable, manageable number for the taxpayer. So although the number is hovering at around $30 million, we don't anticipate that that is going to be the number that will go out to the public. As a board, we do want to get this finalized at some point in May, so the architects could prepare the paperwork, provide it to the state, and that way we can meet our deadline so we can go out to a public vote in November. And that allows the Board of Education to avoid having to pay the charges associated with the election, with the polling, which amounts to approximately $25,000. We're currently at the point where we're dealing with a number of different items that deal with roofs across the entire district, deals with windows, masonry and railing repairs, stage rigging, new playgrounds and playground equipment for our elementary schools that are outdated. Parts of them are not functioning and are unsafe. Upgrading the facade, deteriorating facade at HBW. We have a potential upgrading motorized gym door at HBW. Upgrading floor and wall tiles that have broken and deteriorated significantly over time at the high school. A new gym floor in the new gym at the high school. Assembly doors throughout the district for large areas like auditoriums and multipurpose rooms and gymnasiums to ensure our students and staff safety. Rekeying the high school and the middle school. Renovations to the locker rooms at the high school, both boys and girls, with the athletic trainer room facility being created for a 21st century space that's appropriate for boys and girls, as well as renovating the middle school locker rooms for both boys and girls. Paving at Lanning Avenue School and VHS, a new athletic track with new drainage to deal with some issues over at HBW, dealing with an FN Brown exterior drainage issue, phones and sound system throughout the whole district, minus the high school, which was taken care of in the last referendum. Boiler repairs across most of the district, 4 out of the 6 schools. And then we also have solar and structural work that amounts to about $1.3 million. At this point, the board is not going to be including that in the next referendum because the return on investment is not there, because our roofs will not be able to support the weight of the solar panels without significant enhancements to the roof structure, which thereby really decreases the return on investment there. And then the last component that we are discussing is some of the feedback from the community around the inclusion of air conditioning. So that number is about $5.5 million right now, which is a large number, and we're kind of grappling with what do we do with that. So we've had some really good conversations on that. We do anticipate that by May, we'll have the project ready to be presented publicly, and we will be doing a public presentation here, followed with some press releases to the community, and then followed with late summer, fall, a number of meetings with community members in our schools to really get the information out there and answer any questions and be able to provide the literature that they need in order to make an informed decision.
I have a real quick question. On the track, so historically, we've done that in conjunction with the MKA. Are we going to do that in a partnership, or is this going to be all us at this point?
So this will be all us at this point. MKA does use our facility. We are in the process of reaching out to them and have been attempting to have some dialogue with them in regards to an agreement moving forward. So if MKA were to continue to use our facility, we would like to have a conversation with them about what that agreement looks like. So as soon as I have some more details on that, I'll be able to share that back with the board, and then we could certainly share that publicly because it would be a public board resolution.
And then I just think it's important to say too, with that air conditioning number, that's exclusive of our utility costs. That would obviously rise with that. So
That is
it's
correct.
something that we need to take into consideration.
That is correct. Utilities would definitely go up, and there is, in this referendum, no way to bond for the operating costs. So that is something that we would have to grapple with. Any other questions or comments regarding the progress? Is there anything that I perhaps missed on the referendum discussion?
The only thing is, when will we get the final numbers on the playgrounds?
We're hoping that within the next week or so.
Okay.
Yeah, we're pushing all the vendors that by next week we have all of our numbers.
Okay.
So our timeline was by the end of April, let's be really firm on what the items look like, what the numbers look like. We spent a couple times a month looking at this. I think we're in a good place right now. It's just a matter of tightening up a couple of more minor things and then being ready to go with a board resolution in May.
Yeah. I would also think it's important to put out to the public, there's 5 board members who have a very detailed, thick binder that outlines what each category entails, the cost of it. There's pictures that the engineers and architects took of what some of these spaces look like. So approach us, ask us, talk about it, really be informed, because it's really important when you go to the polls to vote on this, that you know exactly what you're going to be buying. So other
Yeah.
than that.
And just to add to that too, I mean, the items on this, potentially might be in this referendum are pretty mission critical. A lot of them involve safety, a lot of them involve security. Roofs are very critical. Rigging that's been around since the 50s that are still in the schools need to be replaced. Some of the things we talked about with the phones and items like that need to be there for security and safety. So again, the items in the referendum that we'll be talking about are items that we need, so as opposed to the wants. So
And to Mr. Day's point, just to give people some context, and these will all be released publicly as well, we'll communicate all this information in great detail. I mean, we're just looking at a number of safety issues, just between roofing, that's over $7 million across the district, stage rigging, which is another $3 million, we're already over $10 million, right? That just on basic safety issues. We have some other issues like windows, which we would argue as well, some safety issues there. We have windows that can't be opened. We have windows that, if they're opened, which is why we keep them locked, would pose a safety issue with those windows they would potentially fall down. Some of them have fallen down. We want to avoid any injury. So we have a number of different concerns here. $10 million right off the bat are very quick safety issues that absolutely have to be addressed. And there are a number of other items that really need to be addressed as well from other safety aspects. And we'll communicate all of that to the public when the time is right, once we've made up our mind as to what's the most appropriate. Anything else on referendum before we move on? Okay, the pilot funding, back on March 19th, Ms. Fresky and I met with Mayor Ryan and Matt Cavallo, the township manager. The purpose of that meeting really followed up some conversations that we've been having for a long time as a Board of Ed around the distribution and the request for consideration around pilot funding to the school district. I've had conversations with Matt Cavallo over the years. Those conversations have been very congenial back and forth. We've had good dialogue. I know that the board, during several joint meetings over the years, has always requested consideration for pilot funds. Unfortunately, we've never gotten to the point where anything really came of that. I did email Mr. Cavallo a couple of months ago now, informally requesting to have some ongoing dialogue and discussion. Mr. Cavallo and Mr. Ryan kindly met with us on March 19th. Ms. Fresky and I had good constructive dialogue with them. And really to encapsulate that meeting, the driving force of that was we have potentially housing developments that are imminent that will be coming into Verona. That is no secret. With the Mount Laurel case and the impact that can potentially have on our school district, quite frankly, for me as the superintendent and for this board, is concerning. Not only because of the increase in enrollment to our schools, which are already really at capacity, but what the implications of that as far as our staffing and our programs and services, what that does to with those challenges of increased enrollment. So some of the numbers that have been thrown out as far as how many units would be potentially developed, how many bedrooms in each of those units, it is not unheard of that it could bring as little as 50 students to Verona, and it could bring as many as 250 students to Verona. I'll speak to it a little bit with the budget and what Ms. Nardino and I have been working on and what that means for enrollment, which fluctuates from year to year. But every time we have to split a class at the elementary level, that additional cost in our budget is approximately $75,000, salary and benefits and other expenses. And that doesn't account for, making sure that we have the actual physical space for it. That's just in our human resources capital.
Yeah, I think the meeting was very positive, and it was an actual conversation. It was a back and forth. There was a lot of meeting of the minds, of them really listening to what our concerns were, what the pain points were. And, they have their own set of circumstances that they're restricted by. And like Dr. Dionisio said, we're hoping to be able to come to some agreement before anything happens. So then going forward, whether it's 1 student or 250 students that we get, there's a number already in place. So if no students are impacted, then that's great. And if we have a number of students, then we're gonna have an agreement going forward. So that's the hope, is to have something in place before.
So the framework that you're trying to work towards is a per pupil stipend or payment?
Yeah, that would be a good way to look at it. That's what we're hoping for. That would be an ideal situation.
Well, that's, that's further along than the previous 10 years we've been having.
Yeah, and it
this
wasn't
discussion.
met with a total shutdown. Like, it was heard with very open ears, and we're gonna go back and talk to the full council. So hopefully that's going on that end, and we're gonna come and hopefully everybody's gonna move a couple steps in.
Do we even know of any other districts that have similar type agreements with their towns? Or?
I don't know off the top of my head. I do know from several other communities that are dealing with similar situations that the same conversation is happening there prior to an agreement being approved by their council with the developers, because naturally there's a financial implication. But other communities are facing similar challenges.
Yeah, we've been stonewalled for so long that it's hard to get very enthusiastic about it, but fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I like that word, stonewall.
Well, we have been, I mean, to be
For some
perfectly frank,
years.
yeah. Well, since 2009, I think, when we first started talking about it, was that it was the first hilltop development. And granted, there wasn't much money coming in right away, the way the project is structured. You don't see money very much for the first many years, but they're seeing some substantial money now on the first hilltop. And I don't know. Dr. DiNizio's child. I don't know who else is coming from.
So that property there has about 12 or 13 students.
Okay.
Annan Flag Building, which was just opened,
Yeah.
as of right now has one child that is enrolled for next year.
Okay.
I actually just asked Mr. Balaj, our manager of IT, to run new numbers at the three big properties right now. Hilltop,
Right.
on White Rock Road, Park Place, or Verona, Verona Place, on Bloomfield Avenue there, and then the Annan Flag Building.
So the Bear development, the old bar, not Bear Bar, the old bar, those houses were not pilot, they were just developed.
They were just developed. That's right.
Okay, let's,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was more productive than it was in the past, and I really feel like everybody listens with an open mind and good intentions, so.
It was a productive meeting.
Yeah.
Now we are at the point where it's on the town council side. We're waiting to hear back from them. I have been in communication with Mr. Cavallo. There is no tangible progress yet to report back to us, but he did share with me that they had a conversation following our meeting.
Oh, they did, great.
And I just checked with him yesterday. So I'm hopeful that there is going to be some progress. And the reason this is so important is because the 2% cap is so challenging for us. The loss in state aid for all of those years, now we're building it back up, but we're still $800,000 shy where we should be. Our community has expectations, and we do as well, what we want to provide for our students. It gets more and more difficult every year. I can't imagine how we were going to be able to pull that off if we had another 50 students or 100 students in the buildings. It doesn't take many students in a certain grade level to really have to split more classes, and we're getting at a point where we're running out of room. So if this continues, long-term, it could be something that a future referendum could be building additions if we have this kind of influx of an increase in enrollment, right? So we have to be mindful of all of that.
Yeah. So I think during our conversations, it came up that we have the prerogative that if students do move into pilot buildings, that if the enrollment is too high at a certain particular school in that district, that it's at your prerogative to spread that to a different school to redirect.
That's right. So last year, I recommended to the board, and we passed a resolution that if a child moves into the development on White Rock Road or Verona Place on Bloomfield Avenue or Annan, that, for example, the Annan Flag Building, that would be zoned for Brookdale. a child who lives in the Annan Flag Building may attend Brookdale with our new map of those 3 properties, but the superintendent and the administration has the discretion to offer other schools and prohibit that child from going to Brookdale,
Yeah, so if it were a
dependent on the
different
class
class and
size.
split it, we
Absolutely.
could make that decision.
Absolutely. And we've had to make some of those decisions already, and what we did was we grandfathered everybody in who was currently already in the district, in their district school. We just felt like at this stage it wasn't a problem, but we were really looking ahead to trying to prevent any future problems, not knowing how big the developments become. So if there's development of the Pokel property or the Camico property, that's technically the FN Brown section, but if somebody moves into that area, they could end up going to Forest, they could end up going to Brookdale or Lanning, depending on what the class size numbers are. It is possible that a family could have one child at one school and another child at another school. We would try to avoid that, because that would be difficult for a family, but that is possible. It's a little easier to absorb when we're dealing with the middle school and high school. You know, because we have more classes that students would be able to go into. Any other questions on pilot?
No, basically.
I just wanted to say that I think we all live in town, we all know there's a council election coming up, and as residents, ask the question to the candidates, say, what is your stance on pilot? And you know, with the schools, and will you support pilot funds for the schools? So it's a good question to ask as a resident, if you care about it. So, and I know there's some candidates that are supportive of it, so ask that question.
So just a brief update on the budget. Ms. Nardino and I will be formally presenting this 2 weeks from now on April 23rd. But Ms. Nardino has been hard at work this year. As we all know, last year was a very, very difficult budget year for a number of different reasons that we've talked about quite extensively over the years here, and we talked about last year. So the budget timeline starts every year in November. As Ms. Nardino says, it feels like it never ends. It starts in November. We really start taking a look at what our budgetary needs are. That's really more at central office and trying to get a sense of where are we at. School has just started in September. We got everybody back, and we're now starting to look ahead, believe it or not, to the following school year. We then move into December. We have conversations with the building level administration in an effort to get their feedback around new programming, what they're anticipating as projected needs and challenges and areas to continue to grow program and our staffing. Between the months of January and April, Ms. Nardino then really starts to crunch the numbers as far as what healthcare could potentially look like, what our salaries are going to look like in the next year, along with all of the line item accounts. And we start to try to streamline fiscal efficiencies and making sure we're looking at whatever we're currently doing, is there a way to do it better? Is there a way to do it more fiscally responsible? We get to March, where we do the adoption of the preliminary budget. That happened a few weeks ago. 2 weeks from now, we will do the formal adoption, and then we end up presenting the information to the public to make sure that everyone has the information that's necessary, so that way they can be educated as to what the process is. And Ms. Nardino always includes here that each November we have school board election, and in 2019 we have 2 seats up on the board. As far as the constraints, there are many. We mentioned earlier 2% cap that we're all very familiar with. It came in 2010. So that limits how much we can grow our budget each year on the tax levy cap. We have the fact that we have the cap really limits us in how we can go and exceed it. So most recently, we exceeded the cap with the 2 second questions, the one on mental health and the other question on full-day kindergarten. So that's one creative way of being able to get out to the community for anything new above and beyond what our tax levy is able to provide. Over the past, say, 8 or 9 years, the loss in state aid, where we were at $1.5 million or so back in 2010, and that dropped precipitously to about $70,000. Climbed up a little bit and incrementally has gotten us closer to the $1.4 million, but that accounts for a cumulative loss of over $6 million. We'll never see that money again. So that has really had quite an impact here in Verona. And I'm proud to say that even prior to me becoming superintendent, that this board has done a tremendous job in managing the fiscal resources to get us to the point where we are today, with the types of outcomes that we're providing on such a limited budget. Also important to note that out of the entire budget, our local school budget, 95% of that is funded locally. It's about 5% comes from other types of aid, whether it's federal aid or state aid. And then the last constraint that we just recently talked about as it relates to pilot funds is the potential increase in housing and enrollment impact to our community and what that would do. And obviously the constraints with the 2% cap and it would make our work much more challenging for sure. So before we actually get into a general overview of what our school budget will afford us moving into next year, let's talk a little bit about what some of the moving pieces are, the variables, the budget variables that allow us to adjust where we're going from year to year. So the good news here is that coming in for 2019-2020, we're able to build in many of the things that were cut last year out of the budget. Okay, we're not quite there where we're building in everything 100%, but we sure got close. So we've done a great job this year, really making sure that we're leveraging all of our resources most efficiently. The first thing that we've been talking about for about 5 years now is really utilizing our financing of technology equipment, so that way we can end up purchasing Chromebooks and updating our labs. So we have this year a number of different finances that are coming off. We're able to roll that debt right back into purchasing new devices that are now becoming antiquated for our students, and rolling that right back into our new finances, so that way our students can get new Chromebooks and new computer labs, which are now old and aged out. Our special ed increases have been significant over the years. Last year, the Verona Public Schools saw an increase of 10% in special ed costs. For next year, we're only looking at an increase of 1%. That is quite significant in the special ed world. It's a necessary service that we offer, both here in district and outside of district, but the costs are really being controlled at this point. A large part of that is we've had students that are aging out and graduating program. Another part of it is that Mr. Moriello and the Child Study Team has done a tremendous job in building program in the middle school that were previously non-existent, and in the high school, thereby keeping students with special needs here in Verona and keeping dollars here and keeping those students here in their home school, which is more academically and socially beneficial to the child. We've had some staffing retirements post-budget. So last year, after the April adoption, we ended up having several retirements. Those positions were not replaced. They were in the maintenance and facility department, so we were able to keep the costs low there. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're building those positions back in. So we've realized some cost savings there. As we all know, we had to make some difficult decisions last year with some staff reductions and consolidation. People wearing multiple hats, having different roles, going from full-time to part-time. Some other positions were eliminated altogether. Last summer, post-budget, we realized an increase in state aid, about $175,000. This year, Governor Murphy announced that Verona would have an increase in state aid of about $155,000. And as I mentioned earlier, Ms. Nardino and I have spent a lot of time taking a look at the budget and which line items we could be creative with in order to really stretch the dollar as much as possible. And the healthcare premiums, if I recall correctly, last year were about 5%, just shy of 5%, maybe like 4.8, 4.9%. This year, we're at about 2.8% increase.
The increase is 5, last year was 7.
Last year was 7. So
Last year was 7.
we realized.
This current year's 7, next year's 5.
Thank you. So a little comparison about last year to next year. So last year we were in a position where we reduced Verona High School Mandarin program from 100% staffing to 80%. A lot of that was driven obviously by the fiscal constraints, but also with low enrollment. Happy to state that we have increased enrollment. The budget allows for us to increase it this year. So Mandarin next year will be full-time position again. So we're very happy about that. HBW was also reduced to 80%, increase in enrollment, and we are at 100% for Mandarin next year. 2 years ago, we had a full-time English position at Verona High School, which was reduced to 60% last year. And then for this year, it was eliminated altogether in order to make the budget work. For next year, we're going to be restoring that position to 100%. Last year, we eliminated a math teacher at Verona High School. As a result of that, which we were forced to do it to make the numbers work, our class size in certain areas was higher than we had hoped. In an effort to control for those specific bubble areas, instead of adding a full-time teacher with benefits, which would bring along with it about $80,000 to $85,000 in costs, we're going to be increasing, adding 3 6-period stipends to teachers at the high school, which will realize us about an increase of $45,000, thereby saving us an additional $40,000. Last year, post-budget, we had 2 maintenance positions, 2 staff members who ended up retiring in August, September. As a result of that, we decided to hold off, try to get through the year, which has been very challenging, with 2 less maintenance personnel. So for next year, we are bringing one of those positions back. And Ms. Nardino and I have talked about making that position an evening position to allow for increased productivity of that staff member, so that way they can get into the classrooms and not interrupt instruction in the evenings. The director of facilities position was eliminated last year as well. We reallocated some stipends. The cost savings there is about $100,000 after allocating stipends to some current personnel in our district. We'll continue without a director of facilities. I'll continue in the leadership role there, working with those staff members to make sure that we continue with supporting the department. The elementary technology facilitator positions, those were eliminated. They were certainly important 10 or 12 years ago and over the years. Much has changed with the advent of technology and how we embed technology in our classrooms. The access to wireless devices, which did not exist years ago. We will not be adding the position back in next year. It is not a financial decision at this point. It's a philosophical one. It's one where we have our teachers embedding technology in our schools. The cost is about $50,000 a year, which that $50,000 can be utilized in some other areas that I'll talk about later on. And we just don't see that today in 2019 and 2020, that the need is there the way it was 10 years ago, with so much changing. Last year, we did eliminate the director of counseling position at Verona High School. We will be restoring that position next year. There are a number of implications with not having a director. One major one is that our lead counselor at Verona High School is actually prohibited from going to any of the Director of Guidance meetings because the title is not Director of Guidance. Thereby, we don't get access to the information that we really need to have access to. And from a management standpoint, it's a more critical piece at this point with the work we're trying to do in our counseling office. This slide will talk a little bit about new additions to staff and program that we anticipate. The positions that are coming here are above and beyond what we're currently offering or anything that we've offered in the past. So these are not positions that have been cut. These are brand new, entirely brand new to the district. So as a result of an increase in enrollment, HBW French will go up to 100%. This has teetered back and forth over the years, driven by the enrollment. So the enrollment is climbing again at HBW, which is a really good sign. So we're going to have that as a full-time teaching position. We have an incredible amount of demand at Verona High School when it comes to our graphic arts electives. We also have the teachers in that department who teach Photoshop and Adobe, and they're teaching fashion and fashion design 1 and 2, and there's a great level of computer work, and our students really enjoy those classes. They're filled to capacity, so it is not uncommon for those classes to be running at 25 to 30 students on a regular basis, and a great portion of the time we're actually turning students away from those classes because we fill them to capacity. As a result of that, we end up with students in study halls. We want to cut down on the number of study halls that we're offering at the high school. So if students want to be in a regular classroom, which is what we want for them, then this is a great option. And there's a great deal of demand. Even by making Mrs. Shacatano full-time at 100%, we will still have a waiting list of students who cannot get into those classes as underclassmen. But it gets us a step closer to providing different types of offerings for our kids. We're also budgeting an allocated amount of 6-period stipends. So for those who don't understand what a 6-period stipend is, full-time teaching load is 5 classes. So anything above that, teachers are compensated at 20% of their salary. So in many ways, we look for where we can be creative to providing those opportunities for our teachers so that way we can meet the needs of our students. So each year, because we're scheduling between January and May, the challenge becomes that the budget is approved in April. So what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that we have earmarked funds in order to be able, over the summer, when we, in June and July, have an idea of where our budget is and where our scheduling is and what the course enrollment requests are, that we can turn around and we can make sure that we're allocating additional courses to either reduce class size or offer a course that has a high level of demand. So we really have to balance a lot of things out and prioritize and see which courses make the most sense based on the students' schedules that they requested. The elementary schools next year, compared to this year, there will be an additional 2 kindergarten teachers that will be needed. We have 2 bubbles coming through. We have one at Forest Avenue School where we will have a 3rd kindergarten class. A number of years ago, Forest Avenue School had 3 kindergartens. For the past few years, we've had 2. Next year, we have, I think we're at about 57 or 58 kindergarten children. So that would be 3 sections. At FN Brown, we have an additional 3rd section of kindergarten. That has been pretty common practice for the past few years. We have a number of grade level classes at FN Brown that has 3 sections. Lanning next year will have 2 kindergarten, and Brookdale will have 1. Brookdale will typically teeter between 1 or 2, and Lanning has consistently, like Forest, been 2 most years. A few years ago, Lanning had 3 sections that came through over the years that graduated on up to the middle school. And we're realizing some of those bubbles now. Verona High School 5 years ago was 595 students. and today we're at about 710 students. So you see that you can project where these numbers are going to be. So a few years from now, the good thing is that the numbers are higher than they've typically been. You know, we've realized some classes of about 150 to 160 students. We then have had classes of 210 students, 195 students, which is currently here at the high school. It does drop down a little bit, but it still stays, you know, in that 170 to 175 number across the district. We are adding an additional special education teacher at Verona High School. This is part of the continuum that Mr. Moriello has been working on. As our students went from the elementary level to the middle school level, we built a program to keep students here. Now some of those students are moving on up to Verona High School, and this is the next layer of providing that level of intervention by providing the appropriate programming for those students here at Verona High School. It makes educational sense, and it makes good fiscal sense. And last but not least on this slide, we are going to be adding a new BCBA at part-time. There are no benefits to that position because it's 60%. 80% is where benefits are triggered here in Verona. So we really don't think that we need any more than 60% anyway. There really is no justification for that at this point. In the future, we may need to go there, but not at this point. And this will allow us to provide special education services above and beyond what we're offering right now. And this is needed with the students that we have in the district that we need to provide services through their IEP. And our formal presentation, which will include these main components, but we'll go with Ms. Nardino into much more level of detail around the numbers, will be at the next board meeting on April 23rd. Any questions from anyone in the board? Okay,
I
thank you.
like to say it's a little nicer this year than last year.
Yeah.
We're talking about increasing staff and increasing programs, and that's what we want to do every year. But this year, we happen to be able to do a little bit more. So appreciate, Ms. Nardino and you and the folks here in the administration to be able to, work through the budget to get potentially where we're moving forward to on these increases in staffing and programs.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. That was really very good. Do you have anything else on your?
I do not.
Okay, so then we're gonna move to Ms. Nardino and the business administrator's report.
Okay, so when Dr. Dionisio was talking about how difficult the budgeting process was for 18-19, the same is true for what's actually happening. So 17-18 was a rough year. It was very cold. We had a lot of high utility bills. We had a lot of snow, so there was a lot of snow over time. And this year, for some reason, it hasn't been, we've got to like Mach 5 on anything. A lot of things in 17-18 too. In terms of,
Things that happen.
yeah,
So,
right.
so last April.
But in terms of salaries too, so, we had a lot of maternity leave in 17-18, and then we had a lot of sick leave staff members. And when that occurs, you're paying two salaries at the same time, because some people have a lot of sick days, and then you're paying another salary, plus because of Obamacare, those people get benefits also. So this year, knock on wood, we didn't have any big situations like that. Same is true for the special ed. We didn't have litigation, that we had any special ed settlements or students going out mid-year. None of that happened in 18-19. So we've talked about this, and we feel that year ending 18-19 come June is going to look a lot better than it did in the past 2 years, so that we would then discuss as a board about earmarking money in maintenance reserve and capital reserve, or tax levy relief. So we're feeling pretty good on April 9th. And to add to our financial situations as it stands right now in 18-19 is that we got that extra state aid in July, August of $175,000, like Dr. Dionisio mentioned earlier, and we didn't use any of that. So that was an addition, and then didn't use it. So it's going to fall to the bottom line too. So we'll see what happens. Two and a half months ago. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the buildings and grounds supply lines. Now, we've known this for years. We're never budgeting all of our needs just because of all of our needs in other departments, but we're trying to build that up. So for the new board members, typically we're budgeting about $450,000 excluding salaries, just on maintenance supplies, repairs, and typically we spend about $600. So we thought too in the budgeting process, little by little, that we'll get to the number we need it to be. Certainly with the referendum repairs, we won't have as much cost in our daily maintenance. So that's kind of a nice light at the end of the tunnel where we're going to start to be able to build that up along with other things, so long as the state continues to give us additional state aid money. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the RFPs we had mentioned a while back and passed a resolution that we would advertise. So those ads are going to be in the paper on Thursday, which then means that I can start releasing those. It's for the auditor, the school physician, and the health benefits broker. So those are going to be released on Thursday. The proposal due date is April 30th. Interviews we hope to have in May, and then we would like to do a board approval end of May, beginning of June. So then all of those contracts would start July 1. So if anybody has any questions on that. It's pretty straightforward, so.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
I just want to add one more thing that I didn't think about, but just in case anyone in the public has as a question, when Ms. Nardino was speaking, because there could be a question, and somebody asked me this, which is legitimate. If you receive 2 retirements from the maintenance department, didn't fill those positions in August, September for the rest of the year, and we received state aid in July, then if you had that extra money, why didn't you increase some of the positions at that point? And the challenge is, as we mentioned earlier, and I know the board is aware, once the budget is set, and once the schedule is set, it is so complicated to move things around because there's such a ripple effect, and students and families don't want to change the schedule. So once that schedule is built by June, you really can't change it at that point. It's too disruptive. So that's the challenge with getting money after the budget is really approved and closed out, that you're really locked in for the rest of the year.
And when we got that state aid money, the additional state aid money, we discussed that as a board and thought, because we had this, the year before was kind of an anomaly, we're like, what if we get another year like that? So we passed a resolution earmarking it to special ed tuition, and then it never came to fruition. So, but it's a moving target. That's the line I think John Partridge likes to use. The budget's a moving target every day.
Well, and a few years ago,
Change tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
and that's why we put that money into special ed, because a few years ago, and we won't give any details on it, it wouldn't be appropriate, but you could have a family that moves into town from some other school district, and a child could be in an out-of-district placement that is a very high cost, and now that's an unbudgeted number that we have to account for. So therein lies accounting for that in a special ed line item for out-of-district placements. And fortunately, knock wood, we've been in a really good place this year as far as that goes.
Quite the anomaly. It usually does happen that we have something unexpected come up.
Every year, and I think for at least the past 5 years, we've had a budget freeze. Come September, because of things that happened over the summer, and that for some reason didn't happen this year.
So
Did I
we're
just
gonna-
jinx myself?
Yes.
You good?
I'm good.
So then we're gonna move on to the committee reports. We had education. Education.
Sure, education committee did meet today. We received an update from both special education and I'll start there. So ESL Access 2.0 testing is completed. This is an annual assessment of our ESL kids. On April 30th, Verona Child will be holding a supporting reading workshop at home. If anybody wants more information on that, that is available on our website, a link to the registration form. We have currently, for next year's preschool program, 17 tuition-paying students for approximately $72,000 in tuition. This is about normally what we have, so it's not like that's a windfall or anything. But it's always good to have it. Actually, we have a waiting list, and at the end of the year, we'll see where we are with students that we need to put into the program. And we may go to the waiting list and add additional tuition students, but right now we're at 17. We received an update on mediation that we do not go into detail in public, as well as construction. One thing we're going to touch on. ESS, Effective School Solutions, is a program that we voted on in the fall and put into place this spring. Just a quick update on enrollment. At VHS, we currently have 13 students enrolled in that program. We're capped at 20 at the high school on that, so we're a little bit under, but we're really at where we think we are going to be for at least this year, and we'll evaluate different situations and different student needs probably for next year. But we're at 13, and the HPW we're at 9 out of a possible enrollment at 10. So we're almost at capacity there. All the feedback has been very positive. Things are going very smoothly, and just overall well received, and it's freed up other staffing to address other mental health issues. So it's been a good success so far, even though it's been a short period of time. Evaluations are ongoing. And there are buses past inspection.
That's always good. Good to know.
On general ed, we received an update as well. AP tests are coming, first 2 full weeks of May, so students are already prepping for that, and I'm not sure they're looking forward to it, but nonetheless, they're coming. Curriculum's always an ongoing action item. This cycle, or this past month, we've evaluated primarily graphic design, digital photography, things of that nature, which, as was talked about earlier, is some of our most popular classes. And we will be doing approval on those on April 23rd. Mr. Jackson, our math trainer, Mr. Stevenson, worked with the K-2 and also grades 3 to 4 teachers on March 5th to do lesson planning and research, and then lessons were presented on the 11th to the 14th. Pretty exciting stuff. Our school testing coordinators will be providing NJ, SLA, ELA, math, and science training, or they just did on April 5th to all staff. This is what the rebranded park testing. Apparently we don't call it park anymore.
NJSLS.
Same test. Same test, different name. Same test, different name.
SLA.
It's a brand. Park was not a very popular
Bit
name.
my head off.
And,
It's like, right, NJ slot.
yeah, I like that. Principals and supervisors are working with teachers on wrapping up their SGOs, which are student growth objectives, during this month and next month. And SGOs are important to our teacher evaluation process. I think it's 25% of their,
5% now.
oh, 5%?
They dropped it. Governor Murphy dropped it last year.
All right,
It used to be 30%. And then it dropped down to 5.
very good.
Step in the right direction.
The Orton-Gillingham cohort wrapped up their 4th class and completed their coursework. Could you give a little more update on that, because I wasn't exactly clear on that process and how you're moving forward.
So this is the second cohort of teachers that have gone through the Orton-Gillingham program. For those of you who don't know what Orton-Gillingham is, it's a multi-sensory reading intervention approach that teaches children, especially younger children, how to read. The partnership that we became associated with about 4 years ago was through Fairleigh Dickinson University. Our first cohort had 8 teachers across the district that would provide reading level intervention after school and 4 graduate level courses where they're trained. A professor from Fairleigh Dickinson University actually comes in. It's held at one of our schools. The teacher actually will work one-on-one for an hour with 2 children. And then after that class, and that teacher is being coached, and the lesson is being facilitated by the college instructor, that they then go into their lecture part of the lesson and really debriefing. and then their homework is to prepare for the next week's lesson. It is a very intensive program. It is an incredible amount of work to go through it. The teachers who've gone through this program are highly skilled, highly motivated and driven, done a tremendous service to our students, are very skilled now in multisensory approach to reading intervention. And we're now at the point where we have 14 teachers in our district who are trained in Orton Gillingham. And what we're looking at is exploring what does this look like next. So we have a meeting coming up in a few weeks with myself, Mrs. Venezia. I've invited Mr. Shells as a supervisor of humanities, Mr. Miller, and Mr. Moriello, and we're going to be including as well our teachers who are certified to brainstorm with them, and we're bringing in the professor from Fairleigh Dickinson University to see how we can now take our teacher skill set and provide another layer of intervention for our students. Typically, the students who go into the program are in grades 1, 2, and 3. You can use the Orton Gillingham multisensory approach. Typically, it's one-on-one. You could use it in small group as well. So it doesn't lend itself to whole class instruction. That wouldn't be appropriate because of the varying needs of your students in the classroom. But when you work with students in small groups or one-on-one, it's very, very beneficial. So now we really want to take our teachers' skills and talents and figure out how can we leverage that.
Thank you. I would not have done that justice.
We're getting better though. Education committee.
Yeah, I know, it's improved, my knowledge of this area is certainly improving.
In a very short time.
On April 1st, just a recap, we had Katie Fagan in, speaking about her book, What Made Maddie Run. It was a tremendous success. During the day, she spoke with the entire VHS student body who were very receptive. You could reportedly hear a pin drop during the presentation. People were just so engaged and wanted to hear what she had to say. And she was available to take questions afterwards as well. And then that evening, she spoke to about 250 parents and students. The presentation started at 7, went to 8, and then she took questions for another almost hour and a half. So it was really just quite an event. I did not attend, but I know a lot of board members did and administration as well. And it just was a really great event for the community and also neighboring communities.
Yeah, that was
came as
nice.
well.
We did have people from other communities, which was really nice.
So it was great to be able to do that, and maybe something that we could do on, if not this same topic, something else moving forward that's important to the students. We have coming up, we'll need to complete as per state requirement, the comprehensive equity plan. The purpose of the CEP is to identify necessary correct policy, programs, and practices and conditions that may be inequitable. This is just a state mandated program that we'll be working on. Finally, on the agenda tonight, we have for approval a request from a St. Peter's University student, PhD student, who would like to distribute a voluntary online survey to our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers to doing their research on the impact of high stakes online testing in elementary schools, which is a pretty interesting topic for sure. This will be confidential and also anonymous, and the data, no one will interpret who's responding to the data. So that's the report this evening. It was a lot of information as usual. So if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay.
No questions or comments? So then we're going to move on to athletics.
Athletics, we did meet, and a couple things to talk about. First of all, with field hockey, we have a posting out there for the field hockey coach, head coach, assistant coach. So again, Mr. Workle's working on that. I'm hopeful we'll get some good candidates. For spring sports, they're in full swing right now with softball, baseball, track, tennis, I think it's boys tennis, girls lacrosse, boys lacrosse, and golf. Don't forget golf. So they're all out there playing, doing well. The weather's getting nicer, so hopefully a lot more parents will come out and fans and cheer them on. Regarding the baseball field, Ms. Pusco's very excited about this, so I wanted to bring it up. Mr. Merkley even sent me pictures, so that's how excited he was. But we put up these banners at basically at the fields for baseball and softball. The big banners that were put up by the school. They look very nice. So take a chance when you have a chance to go take a look. take pictures, send them to their friends and family.
Is it on that movable fence? Is that where they put them?
No, it's on the back,
Baseball's on the back.
backstop.
Oh, I thought you said softball.
There's softball, yeah, there's two.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
See, you gotta go out and look, walk around once in a while.
Now you're in office.
Is
it spring?
Yeah, it is.
No, but it's,
7 degrees, isn't it? Field trips, these field trips, I wanna go myself.
yeah, I was reading the
One is
list.
going
It's
to
awesome.
to see Wicked, to the Wicked Theater, and the students will be able to learn songs from the show, work with the professional brawling music director on the song, and meet and sing with the members from the show, which is very, very impressive. So I'm gonna have a Q&A session, so, led by Clara Ma, so, a very good trip for the students. Also, regarding fashion, 25 students are going to the museum at FIT, to see the exhibits on fabrics and the fashion area there. And so, again, that will be on the 25th. And then on June 12th, 35 to 40 students will be attending the walking tour of Philadelphia through the Liberty Bell, City Hall, and Mrs. Kunkel's leading that. So again, some 3 great trips.
Dr. Tamburo is taking some kids to see Anderson Cooper on Wednesday as well.
Really? Nice.
Yes,
Very
last minute opportunity.
Yeah,
It's exciting.
it is. I'm a
Is it
story.
tomorrow or next week?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow I get moved up,
Very
last minute.
You go to China. You go to China. That's
Yeah,
enough. That's
right,
enough. And that's all I have for athletics. Any questions?
Do you want to roll into buildings and grounds, which is?
Well, building and grounds, Dr. Dionisio pretty much
Yeah,
covered it.
I think we
The
beat
whole,
that one.
the whole discussion was the referendum. So,
Yeah.
unless we had any questions, I think we're done with that. So.
And then last, Tim, we could go into
Sure.
community resources.
Sure, some of it's already been covered. We talked a little bit about the field hockey coach posting and the negotiations on that. We're continuing our application for certification with the Future Ready Schools. All of our school-based teams are in the process of reviewing and completing their requirements by the June 30th deadline. We already discussed the Kate Fagan, which was, I heard nothing but wonderful things. It just got a great reaction, so we discussed that a little bit. Dr. Dionisio and Mr. Moriello attended the Mental Health Annual Summit, which was a panel of education leaders that are discussing mental health leadership. Dr. Dionisio, I believe, is part of a roundtable, correct? Discussing best practice strategies, community stakeholder engagement, and financial resources, and how best to effectively address the needs. And Dr. Dionisio and Mr. Moriello also collaborated with some other educators and mental health providers just to discuss good strategies and what has been working to help support social and emotional learning in our schools. And then we spent the rest of the time discussing the referendum and how best to engage the community and get all of the information out so that the community can make an informed decision when it comes time to vote.
Yeah, and I think part of our discussion around that is reaching the entire community, not just parents in the school community. So we're gonna work really hard to, everybody needs all the information. Are there any other questions on that? So as far as discussion items, the only thing I'm gonna just throw out is another reminder. Almost everybody completed our board self-eval. We're just almost there, so we just need to move ahead with that, and, because then we can move on to your piece. And any other discussion items?
I just wanted to say, a bunch of folks here attended the VFI event on
Oh, yeah.
Friday. It was an amazing event where we honored the teachers and the staff of the great things they do every day for our students. And they picked 6 select teachers this year, but for a lot of the teachers deserve the awards. But everybody got it presented very eloquently. The VFI folks did a great job with that event at Caldwell College. It was packed. I think it was sold out, crowd, and again, just a great event. And I highly recommend folks to attend it next year. But it is very important to recognize the value and what the teachers and the administration do for our students every day, including the administration folks that are sitting here today. So, thank you.
Very well attended. Last year, I think it was reported it was 120 folks showed up for the event. This year it was sold out. It was 150.
Wow.
So it was really attended. Really nice to see so many different teachers being recognized. It was a great event. Yeah, I would encourage anyone who has not been to really go out and support it next year. But Vivi does a tremendous job. How long? Vivi's 12 years now? No, longer.
12 years sounds about right.
Is that about
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah,
started
yeah.
in-
It's amazing how much work in such a short amount of time Vivi has done. So huge
It's huge.
asset for our
And
district.
that's their big fundraiser, and they provide us some amazing grants on some of the technology or some of the activities that the students do. The FIFI sponsors those. So.
Yeah, and it's nice because it really is just a social, happy event. Everybody's there. And I did realize how old I am and how long I've been in district because I don't know a lot of the teachers by name or face anymore. So it's like,
2006, I just checked my old emails.
yeah.
2006.
So 13, 12, 13 years.
13 years.
You were explaining to me these
I just
details.
wanted to say, I was not at the event, but the picture was blasted out. I don't know if we did it.
We did it.
We did it through. So I was emailing some teachers and saying, oh, such a nice picture. I love your dress. And this one teacher responded and she said, such a wonderful night. It was surreal. I will remember it forever. And she was a recipient. I thought that was really
Yeah.
heartfelt. They made that much of an impact, so.
But just even their little speeches that they got to give, they were so heartfelt, and I think because it's peer nominated, right? So they get to a chance to recognize each other, and just really, it was a really nice evening.
For sure.
Then we're gonna just go into resolutions then.
Resolved that the board approve resolutions number 1 through 7 and addendum resolution number 1.
So move.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Day and second by Mr. Elliott. Is there any questions or discussions on that?
Not discussions, I just want to congratulate Mr. Bozeman, who's the head custodian over at Brookdale Avenue School, who is retiring this August after over 22 years of service to Verona. So he's been a tremendous asset to not only the staff there, but to the kids. Everybody knows Mr. Stanley, and the kids love him, and the teachers love him. So we wish him well in his retirement in the next chapter.
Great, thank you. And then we'll move to vote.
Mr. Aller?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Aye.
Mrs. Prisco?
Yes.
Mr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mrs. Fresky?
Yes.
Yes, have it.
And then we're gonna open it up to any public comments. Any public?
Eugene, your friend?
Kyle,
Did you find everything you said?
sing us a song.
Want to swing the camera around to that?
Nice, okay.
So our next meeting is, the next scheduled public meeting and public hearing on the budget will be held on Tuesday, April 23rd. We're going to begin our confidential session at 5 p.m. and the public board meeting is at 7 p.m. And then we're done for tonight. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
I know, you gotta jump in there. You gotta-
Next time I'm doing it.